Hey there, YouTube. Thanks for stopping by. Moo Dogs, Frugal RCs, and more. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial, kind of a how-to video on how to get more range out of your SYMA X8 series quadcopter. Now, I've done this mod before to my transmitter. Basically, what we're going to be doing is changing the transmitter from looking like this to looking something like this. I'm going to show you guys how to install this 5 decibel Wi-Fi antenna to increase the range of your SYMA quadcopter to probably close to 300 meters. Stay tuned, we're going to take it step by step. Well, all right, I've got all the screws removed and in the tray here. Everything's the same size, so there's going to be no surprises. Just nice to have a magnetic surface to keep everything intact and not rolling off into parts unknown. So with that being said, back of it's already off. The battery cover's already off. Screws are removed. We're going to go ahead and separate the two halves here. Just simply pull it apart. Keep in mind now, don't go reefing on this because we do have the terminals for the battery compartment still attached. I'm going to go ahead and desolder those so we can get this out of the way, and I'll be able to remove the circuit board and show you guys exactly what needs to be removed and then resoldered. And give me 1 second, we'll be right back. Alright, so with a hot soldering iron, I went ahead and I've desoldered both the positive and negative terminals from the battery compartment. And now we're going to go ahead and take this part, which is the back, and we're going to take it downstairs to the drill. And what we're going to do is we are going to drill a hole right about in this area here to mount our antenna. Come on down. All right, we got her downstairs now. Basically, now what I want to do is determine where I'm going to put the hole for the mounting. And it looks like on this one is pretty much set up the same as my X8HC that I've already modified. And you can see by looking at this, I hope this picks up on camera, that there's a flat spot right here, and then there's a spot that kind of contours in. So what I want to do is I want to put the hole right where that contour part is, so it's going to go right about here. Now, there's no exact science on this, no exact measurement. All I want to do is kind of eyeball a center point on here and just take a Sharpie, and make a little X on there, and we'll go ahead and go from there. So now I'm going to go ahead and find the right size drill bit that corresponds with the size of the actual mount or the threads that I have to screw the antenna onto. So give me 1 second on that. All right, for this particular application, I'm using a little bit different type of antenna. The antenna is the same type, but the threading is a little bit smaller than the last one. It'll still serve the same purpose, but we're going to go ahead and see what size we need to use for a drill bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just use a digital caliper on this. You don't have to do it this way. You can eyeball it up with a drill bit set if you want to do it that way. I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way to kind of get as close as I possibly can. And again, this isn't really super exacting, but I think we'll just kind of maybe have a little fun this way. This looks like about 6.7. Let me make sure this is zeroed properly here. So we're in the negatives now. All right, now we're zeroed. And 5.75 millimeters. And I think that's going to come out to like a 7/32 drill bit. Let's go ahead and grab that and see if that is the case. Yeah, that's pretty much close enough. We're only a couple of tenths of a millimeter off. So I think we're going to be fine using this drill bit here. I'm going to use a drill press. I have one down here. It's just more convenient for me. You guys can do it any way you want it to do it. A drill works fine. I usually like to start out with a smaller bit to kind of set my pilot hole and then bore it out with the correct size. And even if I have to use this a little bit to kind of hone it a little bit up and down to get, the correct size for the threads to fit through from the inside, then that's what I'll do. But hang on 1 second, we'll get that set up and I'll show you how I do that. Alright guys, we're going to start out with a smaller bit like I said earlier, and I'm hoping this camera angle is going to be fine for you guys to see what I'm doing here. Basically it's just drilling a hole. So go ahead and get that set up, and we're going to go ahead and drop the drill down. Oops, sorry about the camera there. Find the center spot. We got our pilot hole drilled. We're going to go ahead and replace the drill bit with the right size, and we'll continue. that should about do it. Let's have a look and see if our work paid off. All right, let's take a look and see how this worked out. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to be inserting the mounting threads from the inside out. Because we're going to have to go ahead and strip this wire down here, take this connector off and strip this wire down and separate it and then solder it back onto the existing board. So essentially what we're trying to get here is, oh, and it's a perfect fit too, look at that. So that's kind of the end result, is sort of the end result is what we're looking for. Then there's obviously some washers and nuts that go on there, but then your antenna would simply screw onto the back here. And there it is. Pretty much that's what it's going to look like. So let's head back upstairs and do some soldering. All right, guys, the next step is going to be to solder the, actually strip back the cable that came with the antenna that we're using and go ahead and remove the old antenna, strip back the new one, and then go ahead and attach it via solder onto the circuit board. Now, this is the antenna. The stock antenna is right here. It's nothing more than these two little wires. This is your antenna for this quadcopter. Adequate, yeah, I mean, probably good enough, but if we're doing aerial photography, or if I'm doing aerial photography, I like the option of going up high. By doing this mod, it's been said, and I haven't tested it, but I do have this mod done to my X8HC, excuse me for stumbling with my words here, but I do have the same type of mod done to this quadcopter transmitter, and I do notice a definite difference in range. So with that being said, and I got the new X8C now, I wanted to do the same thing. I'm using a little bit different antenna. It's still the 5 dB antenna. It's still a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi router antenna. So all of that's the same. So it's going to work out essentially the same way. But what I'm going to do now, just to make life a little easier on me, and you can, if you choose to do it this way, you can do it this way. If you don't want to do it this way, you can leave everything as it is. But I'm going to go ahead and take these screws out of the back on this printed circuit board and remove this receiver board from the actual front of the transmitter. First we have to remove the buttons here, and it's pretty simple. They're just pinned in. There's a hole in the bottom here. Fits over the actual button on the circuit board. And then the pin goes into the hole, and then it kind of sandwiches together with the other half of the case for the transmitter. So go ahead and get those out of the way for now. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the screws holding the PCB onto the housing here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and I'll be right back. Okay, with the screws removed from the PCB, we can go ahead and remove the PCB from the front half of the transmitter by simply just lifting up on it. And you'll notice that the LCD screen, that's this board right here, is still attached. So we're going to go ahead and just disconnect the plug from the PCB, and now the PCB is absolutely free and clear to work on. I would recommend you guys don't touch a lot of these chips and things on here with anything metal, and it's also a good idea to have a static strap on when you're working on anything that has computerized chips on it or any kind of programmed chips, because you could lose memory. You could actually damage or ruin your circuit, your board. But I'm kind of a rebel. I don't have a strap here right now, so I'm going to go ahead and just do this on the seat of my pants. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat up two areas here. There is a ground, and one is going to be marked ground, I'm pretty sure, and I can't really make it out. You gotta look a little closer here. We're actually going to go ahead and strip back the cable that came with the antenna that I purchased, and I'll leave a link in the description for the antenna that I'm using. so you guys can check it out. And there is no right or wrong way to do this, guys. You can use pretty much any 5 dB, 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi antenna, router antenna. Works fine. If you guys have router antenna, an old router laying around with an antenna in the back of it yet, and you're not using the router, you know, feel free to go ahead and Frankenstein something together. You can actually use those antennas, and they work the same as what this is. Essentially, what this is a router antenna. So it's the same idea, and it'll work the same if you guys should have an old router with an antenna laying around. So what we have to do right now is we have to actually cut this end off here, because this is actually has a little jack on it here where it would connect onto a pin on a circuit board. Snaps in place. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut this off and strip it back, and there's going to be a shield and then a center wire. We're going to attach the shield to one of these terminals, to one of these solder joints here, and we're going to attach the center, which would be on this other solder joint here. So let me go ahead and get this stripped back, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'll show you what I've done. All right, so the first thing we're going to do in preparing the wire to be soldered in place of the original antenna is we're going to go ahead and cut this end off here. And I'm just using a pair of electrical wire strippers. And on this end here, we're going to want to strip this wire back. I generally strip it back a little ways, probably, oh, I don't know, maybe an inch and a quarter, an inch and an eighth, somewhere in there. And I'm going to go ahead to the 18 gauge, see if that one will fit, and it's not. So we're going to go to 20 gauge. And we'll go ahead and pull that wire back, and I'll show you what it looks like inside once we get this thing stripped. Okay, so now we've got it stripped, and you can see I'm actually going to go back a little bit further than that to give me some working room here, because what we're going to have to do is unravel, or actually bunch up this outer shield wire. You can see here this is a two-part cable. So you have a shield, and then on the inside here, you have an actual wire on the inside. So what I'm going to end up doing here is pulling this back, unraveling this braid here. It's kind of a braided ordeal. So I'm going to unravel that braid and kind of fish that center wire through. So in essence, what I'll have when I'm done are 2 separate wires. And I want to tin those both and go ahead and solder those onto the circuit board. So give me 1 second while I do that, and we'll be right back. All right, so we've got that all stripped back now, and I actually pulled the shield out from around the center wire, and you can see that I have 2 separate wires now. The one that's by my finger right now is the one that actually has a coating on it yet. This would be the center wire, and the one that is below that, facing kind of 45 or so degrees, that are now 90, is the shield wire. And I went ahead and I twisted that together, twisted them both up nice. I'm going to go ahead and tin those now. And what I'm using to tin them with is just simple solder. I've got some flux core solder here, and I also use a little bit of flux paste. And I'm using a non-lead based flux. This is just basically your OD number 5 lead-free tinning flux. And I'm using this to kind of tin the wires. And basically what that is doing is that's introducing solder to the wire, but it's also kind of more or less, if you want to use the word, impregnating the wire with solder. So it's got a good coating, and it's going to actually create a nice hot solder joint when I go to solder this to the board. So what I do is I just take the wires individually, and I will dip them in the flux. And I will go ahead with my soldering pen, which is already hot. I'm going to pick up a little solder off of this roll here. And so I can grab this. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little solder off of here with the soldering pen, or iron. And go ahead and just touch it on that wire that I just tinned. And you can hear a little sizzle there. And if you look close enough, it's going to be kind of hard to pick up on the camera, but that is definitely tinned. It is a lot shinier than it was earlier. I'm going to go ahead and give that one more dip in the flux. And I'm going to go ahead and touch it on there one more time. There we go. And I'm going to do the same with the shield wire. The wire that was around the center core wire here. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with that. Get that one tinned up. Now this is pretty much ready to be installed or soldered onto the board in place of the 2-wire setup that was on their stock. So give me 1 second. I'm going to set that up and I'll show you guys how to do that. All right, the first thing we're going to need to do is remove these 2 wires. Now, I've seen some guys that have left these wires in place. I suppose you could do that. I'm going to go ahead and take them out of the way, get them off of here. And that's going to be nothing more than just heating up these solder joints that are on here and putting some back pressure, pulling back on it at the same time, holding onto the board. So we'll go ahead and get that top one off first. And there's one. Other one's kind of fighting me here. And there's the other one. So now in essence what we have is 2 blank spaces here that we can go ahead and solder the wires that we tinned from the cable and go ahead and get this all set up and button back up. Okay, so I went ahead and I got that soldered on already. It was a little bit too fidgety to do on camera, but I can show you guys real quick how I've done it. Essentially what I did was I used that shield wire. Remember the wire that I told you I had to kind of bunch up and peel back? This is the shield wire toward the inside here, and then the inner wire that was on the antenna and the inner core with the coating on it is attached to this part here for the actual antenna pickup. So that's pretty much it as far as the soldering goes. Now you can go ahead and take a dab of hot glue and hot glue this if you'd like to. It's on there pretty good, and once this is mounted inside the shell, inside the case of the transmitter, it's really not going to go anywhere. But that's pretty much it. The hard part is done right now. The only thing we have left to solder is going to be the power leads for the battery compartment. But I'm going to go ahead and get this put back together, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, guys, now comes the reassembly part of this. I'm actually going to go ahead and solder this on after I replace the PCB back into the front part of the transmitter. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and set this in place. First thing I'm going to do before I do that is go ahead and reconnect my LCD screen here, and that's going to be just putting this plug back in its place. Yep, got to put it in the right way though. And there we are. Okay, so that's back in place. Now we're going to go ahead and set this back in where it was. Being careful not to pinch the power wires underneath. And you want to take your joysticks and make sure they're fitting through the front here of the shell, and there we go. And you want to make sure that all your holes are lined up and this is sitting flush, so it's not up cockeyed one way or the other. And again, paying close attention that you have these that aren't pinched underneath, and you tighten everything down, and then you have to take it apart to fish it back out again. So I'm going to go ahead and get the screws put back in here, and I'll meet you guys back when I'm done. All right, now that we're finishing up getting this PCB back in place, all the screws are tightened down. Next step is going to be resoldering our power connectors to the battery compartment on the other half of the shell. So that's pretty simple stuff. You'll notice that you have underneath this tab here, you'll have a little plus sign. You can barely see it, but there is a little plus sign there and a minus sign there. Plus, hot. Hot is going to be red, and your negative is going to be the black. And we're going to go ahead and solder those back into place and get this thing put back together. So essentially all it's going to take is just setting this up on end. Or like this, actually. And what I like to do is use solder flux on all this stuff. It just helps things flow, and it makes a nice hot solder joint so you're not wondering why things aren't working. I use the lead-free paste. It seems to work just as well as the leaded stuff, and you're not you're not breathing all that crap in. Good idea to have ventilation. I don't have ventilation for doing this here in my little shop area. This is kind of a makeshift shop. My desk is full of other stuff I'm working on right now, and I really didn't have the space to do this. So what I usually do is I'll just dip my tip of the pen in the flux, get a little solder on here, and go ahead and get these things soldered back on. No science here. It's just basically heating up both sides and kind of welding them sort of together here. And there's one. And we'll do the same thing with the negative side there. And there's the other side. So that's all it takes. Now you have your battery compartment is back connected again, and we can go ahead and put this thing back together. Before we do that, we're going to go ahead and install the actual antenna mount, which is going to be this guy right here. And that's going to fit up inside this hole that we drilled earlier. And we're going to have to shim it a little bit because this seems a little bit longer than the last one I had. So I'm going to have to use maybe a couple of extra washers on here so this isn't sticking out too far. So I'll go ahead and get that installed, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, just finishing up installing this now, and you guys can see it. I've got the inside, I've got two washers. It comes with a split lock washer and then an internal star lock washer. That's going to go over the end here, and then it's going to get sent up through the plastic, through the hole that you put in. And then the same way, split lock washer on the inside and the internal star washer. And then we're looking at tightening it down, and that's going to be an 8mm socket. And I just go ahead and hold it on the inside with my fingers. And you don't have to reef on this. We're not building bridges here, but you want to make sure it's good and snug. That's not going to move. And as kind of an extra added, I guess you could call it insurance, what I do is I'll use a blob of hot glue, and I'll go ahead and I'll glue that, and I'll go show you guys how I'm doing that here. So I just get my glue gun hot, and I'll go ahead and I'll put glue around the internal nut there. That way that kind of holds everything in place, and it's kind of a little insurance policy for you there. But that's basically what it's going to look like. Doesn't have to be pretty on the inside. The installation for the antenna is now finished. All that we have to do now is basically put the two halves together, screw them down tight, put the batteries in, and give it a shot once. So bear with me while I get the screws set up on here, and we'll go ahead and power it up. All right, and the last thing we're going to have to do here is just attach the antenna to the mount that we put on the back here. And let's go ahead and do that. Snug that down good. And there it is. And there we have it. That's it, guys. Little word of warning here. If you guys do this yourselves and you lose your quadcopter or you damage something and it's not working correctly, or you hurt somebody in the process of doing this mod, I'm holding no responsibility. You do this at your own risk. Any warranties that are avoided as a result of doing this are your responsibility. I'm doing this for demonstrational purposes to show you how I mod my transmitters for my SYMA quads, and that's basically it. So do this at your own risk. Know what you're doing before you start doing it. If you don't know what you're doing, watch the tutorial again. Get to know, practice soldering on something else. Get to know your tools and how to use them, and do it properly. So now the only thing left to do is go ahead and throw a battery in the quadcopter and do a dry run and fire it up and see if we have connectivity. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and get that set up, and I'll be right back. All right, let's go ahead and get this battery installed here and give it a shot. Want to see what we got. See if our hard work paid off. I've done a couple of these, so I'm pretty confident. Let's go ahead and make sure first that our power is in fact off, and it is. So let's go ahead and connect our battery. And we'll go ahead and stuff our battery in inside the quad here, and we'll go ahead and stow the wires up on top or wherever they'll fit. Close the battery hatch. And let's see what we have here. Turn the quad on. I'm going to move my camera up just a little bit here so we can see what we're doing. There we are. And let's see what we have. Power is on. Binding is up, down, and we should have power. So let's take a look and see what we have. All right. So it looks like everything's checking out. We have the quadcopter operating now. I'm going to go ahead and do a range test on this. And as soon as I get a decent hat cam or a head cam set up, I'll be doing some flight footage, and I'll be rolling in some camera footage from the quad itself as well. But I think that was a success. It looks like everything worked out the way I wanted it to. And if you take your time and do this, guys, you'll be able to do it. Never say you can't do something until you actually try it. And I'm sorry about that, camera's not really focusing. There we go. Don't give up, but watch the tutorial. I've got this out there for informational purposes for you guys to see exactly how you can mod your SYMA X8 series transmitter. Now, you can do this on the X5 series as well, but what I ended up doing is using my X8 HC, the X8HC transmitter. I use this with my X5HC as well. Works out perfectly. It actually really extends the range nicely and works out pretty good. So you could actually, in essence, use this with an X5C as well. The protocol is the same, and you're going to notice a really, really nice increase in distance. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. Thanks a lot for stopping in and seeing me again. If you guys have any questions on anything I've done, put it down in the description or in the comments below. Don't forget to give me a like and a thumbs up, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one. God bless the Republic.